to see you, man. Thanks so much for having a chat with us. I've been looking forward to this one.
It's yeah.
I don't think
Since you
either of us.
first chatted. Yeah.
I don't think either of us are shy of having a bit of a chat.
No, and certainly not about indoor cricket. No.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Now, you and I have we've drifted, sort of in and out of each other's paths along the way, haven't we? Really, but never been part of the same campaign yet. Let's say yet, eh? You never know.
Keep saying no to me.
But we've just found out sort of over the last day or so that we've actually our history goes back a little bit further, eh? All the way back to '97.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's the first trip we played brought an Auckland side or a northern side over. It was coached by, luckily enough to be coached by Paul Bottrell, and we came over to ACT and ran into you blokes. What do you remember from that, man?
Yeah, that was actually that was my first year of coaching the ACT Prem men's side. That was a long time ago, and that was a pretty special year for. So bit of background. ACT is sort of where I'm from, and that was Canberra's where I grew up. Moved there when I was about 5 years old, when the parents moved over from New Guinea, and sort of cricket, basketball, rugby league were the sports I sort of grew up with, and then got into indoor cricket as a sort of 13, 14-year-old at school, and was around the sport for ages and ages, and then finally got a break coaching, getting an opportunity to coach the ACT side, and that year was our first year that we'd made the finals of the Australian Nationals, and so we were pretty high at that stage. I think you guys came over not long after Nationals. I think it must have been in maybe August, September, I think, something like that. So it was still nice and cold for you when you arrived in Canberra, which was good for us. And yeah, that was pretty gun side that you guys brought over from memory. I was just thinking about some of the names that I remember. So Dre was in that side, yourself. I think Hermie.
Yeah, Paul Herman was with us there. Yeah, Paul was with us. And I'm not sure about Brian. I thought Brian was with us because he made the '98 World Cup the next year. So I would have thought he was around playing pretty hard out and probably with us as well. So I'm picking Brian was with us. Spencer Thorpe as well. Yeah.
He was an interesting cat, that fella.
I'll never forget the season. I'm pretty sure it was the '96 season. He was the best bowler in the country. Left arm over the wicket, good pace, big swinging and swingers into a right hander, and just an amazing off cutter. And he was real hard to pick as well. So guys really didn't know what they were playing. It was just coming down at him, and he beat so many players. And when he was on in '96, I think he was easily the best bowler in the country. He was amazing.
Yeah, and that's I suppose that for me now. So I'm a huge history guy. And, I love the learning about the times beforehand. So for me, when coming over to New Zealand, it was I missed all of that. Or the only history that I've got around New Zealand is from doing research about players back before my time. So I had no idea about some of those guys, like going way back to people like Gary Gardner and Steve Gill, Murray Aitken, Gary Saunders, those sort of guys who were way back in the they would have been back early mid 80s.
Yeah.
And learning about some of those, and then the Anokas that were coming through, the Jensens, both Stu, and then some of the guys who I saw here in Wellington when I first started coming over, who were sort of on the edges or out of the scene, guys like Rocket, who I had no idea about these guys, and just how good they had been and what they'd done in and around the New Zealand scene. And then sort of that series in '97 where you guys came over. I think you went to Sydney afterwards. And went up there. For us in ACT, we'd only just started. ACT had never made a finals since the beginning. It was about 85, 86 in Australia is when they first started playing nationals. There was a period there, and I think New Zealand went the same, where they had the ICA and ICF or indoor
ISC, ISC and ICA.
ICA arenas that were the dominant force, and they had things like the New Steel Cup, which was televised, and that's right, some of the footage that you see of the early days of the wars and Ross Gregory as a player and that sort of stuff back then. That was the old ICA days, and they that was early mid 80s, and they knew how to put on a show. That was a group of businessmen that started a sport and really franchised it really well.
In 1987, New Zealand actually sent a side over to the New Steel Cup. It was a little bit legendary because Wayne, and that was when Wayne Anoka was still, he was 17, I think, and they sort of selected like a composite world side out of that tournament, and he made it. And so Wayne sort of, his legend sort of almost started from that point. Just crazy. I remember being a 13, 14-year-old kid and hearing that Wayne had it was only just when I sort of started seeing indoor, a couple of years into it. And and Wayne sort of was almost like a godlike feature because he was, he just played so well over there.
Yeah, I think that they put that on in conjunction with that was when they used to have the World Expos.
Right.
They used to travel to different countries, and so they had the expo was on the Gold Coast, and so then these businessmen put together the series in conjunction with the expo those are the sort of things that we don't realize now. The people who are playing indoor now don't realize just how big indoor cricket really was when it first was really taking off. There's one of the centres in Australia in Fyshwick, where in Canberra, they used to run 24 hours. Literally used to run 24 hours. They would have competitions warehouse style, businesses that had night shift teams competitions that would be running at games that start at midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and literally be running 24 hours a day just playing indoor cricket. And back in those days, it was like you'd ring up and say, and ring up would be on a corded phone, phone to phone, no such thing as a mobile or anything like that. But you'd make a phone call into the centre and say, oh look, the time this week's not too good for us. Can we reschedule? And it would be, back in those days, it'd be like, oh, that's sweet, no worries. Well, you're out of the comp. We'll put you on a waiting list, but at the moment we've got 100 teams or whatever waiting on our waiting list. So you might get back in a season or two. Oh, okay, well we'll play at 3 a.m. in the morning. It's like, you just don't. Those sort of things don't happen anymore. It's like there's just so much flexibility around it. Yeah.
You said expo. So what do you mean by expo?
So they used to have it, and I haven't seen one actually in Dubai. I haven't seen them publicised that much anymore. But they used to have a thing where they would go to a country, and all of different nations would set up their own little booths. And it's a little bit. If you go to Disney World, there's at Disney World they've got a mini expo there where they've got all these different pavilions and things for different countries where they show off their food and their culture and that sort of stuff. And that was held it for a year. One of the first Olympic Games was held in conjunction with with an expo in, I think it was in London or Paris as well. But they don't make so much of a big deal about it anymore. Although I did hear there was one supposed to be in Dubai, and they were doing, when we were there for the World Cup a couple of years ago, they were starting to really promote it and publicise it. But it doesn't seem to be as big a thing as it used to be anymore.
Right. Yeah. Hey, so like what age did you, how did you get into the sport? Like, what was your first experience, and when are we talking?
So it would have been early 80s. It would have been about 13, 14.
Right.
So that was at about 83, 84. And it was with the high school, and we had high school electives, and you could go along and play a sport. And one of the sports that during the winter time was indoor cricket. I'd never seen it, never played it, but went along, um, and yeah, had absolutely loved it. That was
Mm.
that was the ball. I never really took it too seriously for the first sort of 3, 4, 5 years. At that stage, I was still I was playing a lot of rugby league and basketball. They were my two sort of main sports, and then had a pretty bad shoulder injury, which took me out of league. And basketball, I stuck at basketball till sort of 18, 19, and I was always the number sort of 9, 8, 9, 10. And so I'd be training 3, 4 times a week and get, a couple of months of playing time. And that gets pretty tired pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um, so then it was at that stage when indoor cricket started to really take off for me. And I was both my brother Preston and I were 16, 17-year-old kids playing a bunch of mates at the centre, and then we got asked to play in the back then in the centres, the A grade competitions within the centres. Super League wasn't really that big, and well, certainly not in ACT. But the A grade games in centres, we used to get crowds to come along to A grade, and we'd go down and watch the A grade games and the A grade finals and things like that. And then we got asked to play for one of the teams. It was the worst team in the A grade. It was a team called the Boonies, and these guys literally, like, they were that their team uniform was blue. I can't say wife beaters anymore, can I? They're
No, that's racist, mate. You can't say that.
Blue tradie singlets. Half the guys had mullets. Most of the guys in that side, would be outside before and after a game having a sneaky smoke or something of that like. Not that I knew what that was about at sort of that age, but we got involved in there, and then after a while, I started. 1990 is when I started to get serious about indoor, and in 1991 they held the Nationals in Canberra. I trialled for that side, missed out, and as a player, went down and watched. It was, I was hooked at national tournaments. I was just that was me, and that was it, hooked straight away. And I sort of got into doing a little bit. I got asked to do some coaching, and I first coached a masters team up in Darwin, and I would have been 20, 21 maybe, and I was coaching the over 35s, I think that team was, and I had no idea. I was taken along for a ride, and it was just a way to get involved in the sport. And I sort of coached juniors for a few more years. 1994, I played for the ACT, and again, I was one of those guys that just loved the sport, and hung around enough, and then so got selected because I'd pestered enough people and hung around enough, and that was a pretty big experience for me, playing nationals, and with a group of people who, we weren't expected to do well, and we didn't do great. I think we won about half the games, but we were nowhere near a lot of the bigger teams. But I came out of that because I was lucky enough to be involved in quite high levels of basketball and rugby league. I got exposed to some really good coaching, some really good structures, some really good cultures and processes, and I got really critical about our team and the way that we went about things, saying, well, look, we had a lot more talent than what we showed, and if we were better prepared, better coached, better set up, then we do better. And it was just taking along a lot of those other experiences that I'd seen in other sports. And so then it was at that ripe old age of sort of 23, 24, went, I'm never going to be a star player, but I've got an opportunity to maybe get to higher levels by becoming a good coach. And so that's what then set me on that. And then, so 94 played, 95, 96, I went back to coaching junior boys, and then started coaching the Prem Men in ACT 97, and sort of did that until 2007, 2008, I think it was, just before I came over to here. And that was some of that was me. That was growing up. That was my indoor cricket was my family. That's how I grew up. I got married at 21. Most of the people at the wedding were cricket people. All my social life was around indoor cricket, and we just lived and breathed it. It was fantastic, and I have some great memory. We used to do things like that ACT side. We only had 3 or 4 centres in Canberra, so we never really travelled. We never really had a great Super League competition or ability to take a great Super League competition. So we put together in essence, it was our state side, which was pretty much from one centre anyway. But we used to travel up to Sydney every week and play in their Super League competition. So we would drive sort of 2.5, 3 hours up, play one game of Super League, and then drive back home. And then as we got into rep season, a lot of those guys would be part of it. So we would drive that on the Saturday, then Sunday morning, we'd get home at 2 or 3 o'clock on Sunday morning. And then, we'd have a state training session at 10 a.m. the next morning. And guys loved it. That was what we did. And that made us a really good family. It really was. I've got no other way of really describing it. It was a family of cricketers, and people grew up people got pulled into our side and grew up within the environment. And it's some of my best memories of indoor cricket are both on and off the court with that group of people.
So the early like those early times you were involved in and around the state champs, was that the same format as it all is now? So sort of 5-6 day long tournament.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's always been like that. And 8 ball overs. We had a few years there where and it's interesting now that seeing how successful the ACT has become and continued to go. And became most successful once we changed over to 6 ball overs for nationals in Australia. They used to run a televised competition in the middle of the national championships, which was sort of an abbreviated knockout style tournament, which is what they use for television. And that was 6 ball overs. And so we would have this thing going on where you'd play every team at least once. And back in those days in the Australian champs, there was a full 8 sides. So Northern Territory and Tasmania used to have teams. We didn't have a North Queensland. They came on later on as Northern Territory and Tassie dropped off. And it's a strange, talking about Tassie dropping off. Tasmania were one of they were like the gun side for the late 80s, early 90s. They were amazing. They had some of Australia's best players, guys like Mickey Peters, John Robson came out of there, Gary Cumberbatch. Came in sort of, they had some some absolute amazing players, and then they just dropped off the scene. They suffered through numbers and just dropped off. But it was always in that sort of same format, 5 or 6 days. Well, you'd get there on a Saturday, tournament start on Sunday, grand final would be the following Saturday, fly home Sunday. So you're away for 8 or 9 days. And it's something that I coming across when I come over here, seeing the difference in the cultures. So we had people every year you'd go away and it'd be a week off work for nationals and cost you $2,000 or $3,000. But to get to that, you had to play in Super League, which was every week, and you'd be paying $15 a game for Super League for 15 rounds. So there's another $200 or $300. Plus you'd get uniform for Super League. Plus cost and time that went into it was just unbelievable. And
there's a real devotion, eh? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the only way to be successful over there was for people to really work on their game, and if you didn't do the work, then you very quickly got shown up.
There's two things I've pulled out of that. The first time I saw Gary Cumberbatch was in a Trans-Tasman series at Royal Oak. I spoke to Toddy about it actually, and he came over with the Aussie side. Two names I remember, actually three, I've got to say, three names out of that Aussie side I remember. One's Greg Matthews, rest in peace, Snake, who was just an amazingly talented, so relaxed, you know, on the pitch, knew exactly what he was doing. John Mark Joffa, who was player of the series, took a couple of the most unbelievable outs I've ever seen at point. And that's including Billy Murray, who was pretty special there for New Zealand. And Gary Cumberbatch, left arm, quick, and all the guys spoke about him. He was heavy, really heavy. I don't remember too much. I just remember the names, and so just a little bit of spectacular cricket. Yeah, just amazing, eh?
Yeah, and so my first Nationals 91s I watched when it was in Canberra. 92 and 93 I umpired, and so a lot of those I umpired it. And so I had the box seat. I was sitting in the stand with, you know, watching a lot of these guys just doing their things, and it was amazing seeing. And you talk about guys like Greg Matthews, but then there's John Mark, there's John Robson, who played for a few different states in Australia, and he was probably at one point he was probably considered to be the best indoor cricketer in Australia. Wow. And so he was there before. This was before, you know, prior to 95, you know, when we had the first World Cup. So that's when people started seeing stuff outside. But you know, the Western Australian side at that stage had people like Greg Matthews and Adrian O'Connor. Trevor Lindsay was the keeper. Toddy talked about being the tallest, biggest wicket keeper in world in cricket. Trevor Lindsay, I think, might have had Toddy by about 2 or 3 inches. He wasn't a solid build like Toddy, but although Toddy, I think, over-talked himself there. He was always pretty athletic in his time. But Trevor Lindsay would have been he would have been 6'3", 6'4" as a keeper.
Wow.
Gunner, great player, good bat. And so we had these sides, and Dougie Frame, Wayne Fontana. We're in that WA side at that time. Queensland, and see, people talk about Queensland, and Queensland were never great. They had a little bit like their Sheffield Shield in the outdoor cricket. They didn't get their first Nationals win until it would have been the mid-90s, late 90s. And then they had a run, though. They didn't have a run from there over the next sort of, and still, you know, they're absolutely the you know, they are the cream, and you know, to get a national title, you've got to go through Queensland is pretty much the way it works, even with the emergence of people, you know, states like the ACT. But you know, WA
and Western Australia as well, always been strong.
Yeah, they go up and down. They went through a period, you know, late 80s, early 90s, where they were very strong. Then they got quite weak. It was between WA and Queensland were the strong teams through the 2000s, and they won quite. And that's when guys like Nick de Grease and Ty Hopes and you know, those guys started emerging in that 2000. And it's one of these. One of the things when I came here to New Zealand is that there seemed to be a real preoccupation here in New Zealand to be like Australia.
Yep.
You know, to beat them, we need to beat them at their own game, and that's never going to work in my head. You know, we need to find how does New Zealand play? What's our culture? What's our style? And get really good at that, and make sure that whoever's playing is actually just playing their game, rather than trying to mold a game to suit something else. You know, and it's I saw this morning, Bots put up a a post about the ABs last night. And,
Yeah, saw that. Yeah.
And to me, that was the sort of thing that it's spot on. It's like the Saffers never change, and actually, whether it's indoor cricket or rugby or whatever, that you know when you're coming up against a South African side, you know what they're going to play. They've got their style. They're really, the South African batters are, they're going to be great on their front foot. They're going to drive the ball well. They're going to have guys that bowl a heavy ball. They're going to be intimidating and big and tall in the front court. They're going to be mobile. They're going to be noisy. They're going to be aggressive. And they play that same style all the time. And when they play that style is when they are the most successful. When they try and change the style is when things drop off. And the same with the South African rugby side. If they tried to play an AB's game, they'd be hopeless. So why do the ABs try and play the South African game to beat them? Is it just so that we can show, well, we actually are the most dominant, we can play however you want to play, we're going to play it the same way, and we're just going to be better than you? And it's
maybe
a mind game, maybe. But yeah, I just love creating, or not creating, but identifying and harnessing what the culture of a group is and what the style of a group is. And I think it does need to change as you go, but it shouldn't be about changing it on what someone else thinks. It should be a change that's an organic change based upon, well, what have we got in front of us? How do we get the best out of this group and play that game? We might have an emergence here of 6 great spin bowlers. So if we've got really good spin bowlers, let's play the game based around that strength, and see how and work on that. Now, you don't want a situation where the best 4 guys might be spin bowlers, and you say, well, we can only have 1 or 2 in the team, and therefore, 2 of the best players miss out, because you're saying, well, we've got here's the pattern that we want to have. And so I think we just need to keep seeing what's happening in us internally, and that's our way of getting better longer term. Even creating styles within New Zealand. It's like the back in the Tri-Series days, when it was just the 3 teams of Southern, Northern, and Central. Central would play a different style of game than what Northern would play, and that would be a different style than what Southern would play. And that's a great. And then we try and change all of that when we go and we ask players to do different things when they get to play in an international series than what they've gone up with. The less people think, I think, in indoor cricket, the better. It's sort of.
Yeah, look, I've got some opinions on the way things have been set up in the past and what I've been involved in and all the rest. But it just seemed like it was all learnings along the way. Guys are just sort of trying to feel their way through what might be the best for that particular unit, but at the same time, sort of moving away from what those strengths were as well. I'm probably not explaining myself very well, but you've touched on it there, where if somebody's skill set has helped their team win at a Tri-Series, and then they make a New Zealand side, and then you've asked them to go and do something different outside of that because it it's just, you're not allowing that player to fully express themselves and fully back themselves. And I think there was a little bit of that, but again, it's just learnings. It's not finger pointing. It's just the way things were. They're quite rigid.
Absolutely, exactly. And it's I don't mean that as a criticism of anyone.
No.
At all levels, it's one of those things that you do what you. I don't think any coach or any team structure, any management group has ever gone into a campaign and said, let's do a really bad job, or let's make things hard. Let's do things. Let's do this because we don't want to be successful. No one ever sets out to do that. And each time we do something, the biggest skill that you can have in life, never alone in sport, is to be able to look at something and go, oh, okay, I made a mistake there, but not beat yourself up because of the mistake, but treat it as a learning. You know, this is okay. If I could redo this, would I do the same thing? Yes or no? If the answer's no, then what would you do differently and why? And so, okay, given the same circumstances, then prepare yourself to make that different decision the next time. So yeah, so I'm rambling a bit too because it's
all right.
Performance and high performance is my thing across the board.
Who's so like player wise or guys, people in the sport who've been your like real influences? You know, who are the guys that have really sort of helped mold you, early on and becoming the sort of coach and you understanding the sort of coach that you wanted to be?
Yeah, so it was one of my early basketball coaches, a guy by the name of Steve Fox, was one of the biggest influences. And I wrote him a note after 2007, when at the World Cup in Birmingham, after coming back with the Australian women, I wrote him a note thanking him for what he did to me and how he set me up within indoor cricket. A lot of different people had influences on me. There's a guy in Canberra, Con Flores. So not so much from a coaching, but passion and approach for the sport. It's skills I've picked up from all different places, but it's passion that I've learnt the most from other people, and the people who've had the most passion are the ones who've given me the most learnings. So Con Flores was definitely one of those people. So Con, for those who probably a lot of people recognize the name Flores, but Con is
They better do. There's about 18 of them playing.
That's right, exactly, yeah. So Con is the brother of Billy and the father of Matthew, Timmy, and Benji, who've all So he's and he was the center owner that I first worked for, and so that's where I learned my indoor cricket through Con and through him and his brother Tony. And they are cricket. They are ACT cricket royalty, because they've always been involved, right from the beginning of the sport in Canberra. So Con was probably one of the biggest ones. Then as I moved into international, people like Bots was another a big influence for me. So after that series in 97, when you guys came across, Bots and I had stayed in touch, and then which led to a couple of years later, I asked Bots to come over and be part of some of the ACT tours at nationals, and gave an opportunity for me to see how he operated and did things within our environment. And then he was pretty crucial alongside Lee Kelly-Rat to get me across. When I first coached the Central team, trying to think what year it was. It must have been about 90. Actually, it might have been 2006 was the first time I flew over to coach that side when it was either 2006 or 2007 when it was held in Wellington on the downstairs courts.
Oh yeah, sure.
We played against Northern in the final. And I remember it's a story I always tell about going into the last pair, and I think the rucker had batted third. I can't remember who rucker batted with third, but coming in last was Fausti and I think Darren Crook, and they needed something like about 8 or 9 runs. And I'll do a little bit of self-censoring here, but Fausti and Crooks had come out. Rucker being Rucker, the guy Derek Mann, sorry. He's
I think that was me. I think I batted with him that that
Yeah,
tournament. Pretty
yeah,
sure it was.
and you guys left the court, I think, with Crooksy and Fausty needing something like about, I don't know, like 10 runs, I think it was, to win the game. This was 8-ball overs still, and Rucker's come up, and I'll sort of do this little thing with in terms of the camera, like Rucker's here like this at Fausty's face, screaming at him, there's spit going everywhere, saying to him, we've done all the hard work, you just got to finish this off, don't, and everything. Fausty would have been, he must have been like 17 or 18 at that stage. I think it was his first try series. Yeah. And Rucker's just giving it to him. I'm sitting at the back there, like in my first tournament, thinking, what the hell's going on? Who's this idiot? What's he doing? And then that came down to the last over, and Dinger was bowling to, and Crooksy was on strike at the start, and I think they needed like 3 or 4 runs off the last over, and Dinger bowled, I think, 5 or 6 dot balls and 1 wicket or something. And I mean, Dinger was a great bat and a great front court fielder, but you'd never pick him to be the guy who's going to bowl you an over to win a game in that situation at that stage. He's certainly made even as he's got older and older, he's got better and better with his bowling and more attacking. But that's why we had him bowl the 16th over, because we wanted to win the game before we had to bowl. And he came out and did that, and all I kept thinking was, Rucker had all he'd done is put into the heads of Crooksy and Fausty about what not to do, and yelling at them and telling them what not to do, and that then meant that's exactly what they did do. And that was a real coaching moment for me as well, because I could see it happening on that sideline and go, okay, there's a direct impact of words and actions to a result, and it's moments like that if you recognize them and start to, I can learn from someone else and go from there. But that was coming across, that was a result of Rat asking me to come over, and that was because he was coaching must have been 2005. As you know, it was earlier. It was 2003 when Lee had he was like captain coach of a side that came across to Australia for a test series, and they went everywhere, and they were touring at the same time as England, but Australian indoor cricket wouldn't let England and New Zealand play against each other. So England played against a 5-test series against Australia, and the Kiwis played might have only been a 3-test series, but they made them travel they played a test in Melbourne, they played a test in Canberra, they played a test in Sydney, a test in Brisbane, and it was at the prize giving at the end of it, and Lee and I sat down over a beer. I was coaching the Australian junior boys, and we played, so in Canberra, we had the test, we had England had a test match, but the New Zealanders didn't have a test match in Canberra, but they were there anyway.
Right.
But they played against the ACT side. And then after that, I went up to Brisbane and was coaching the Australian junior boys. We had a camp. We had no tours at that stage for the juniors, but we had a development camp, and we played games against both the English side and the New Zealand side. And it was the prize giving. I sat down with Lee and we had a big chat, because he knew that I'd been doing some stuff with bots already at that stage. And then, so he asked me, so that would have been 2003 that Lee was doing that. So maybe it was 2006, a couple of years later. He just called me up, because I'd been doing the stuff with bots, and then he called me up and said, come over. And so that was another big influence for me, getting exposure to different styles of games and different environments.
What did you see? What did you see out of someone like bots? Like, what was the difference? Some of the differences you saw between, like, I wanted to know out of you, or draw out of you today, what were the key differences in coaching styles you've seen in New Zealand and Australia, and not just coaching styles, like what are the differences in the way things are set up and the culture, and in the two areas.
So for me, Bots is super analytical, super technical, and that's something. So I'm the first to admit I'm not a great technical coach. I get by with my with bowling and batting. I can do enough to get a player some structure, but I'm no good at trying to tell someone, you need to put your hand here to be able to bowl this, or teach something. And that's something though that Bots is actually very good at. He's very good on the technical part of the game, and he's very good with his analysis. So we would do a debrief after a game, and Bots was really insightful. Always, every time I've been involved with Bots, he's really insightful about picking up things, both about our own performance and about things in the opposition that we can maybe try and exploit at a later time. And so I love coaching with Bots because we have quite complementary styles about it. So I'm very little about technical and very much about culture and team, and also about the a structure with flexibility though. It's not a rigid do this. It's here are the things that we need to do that allow you to then just do whatever else you need to do on the court, sort of stuff. That sort of a structure. And Bots was really good at that stuff. He was just great at the technical things and picking up little bits and pieces. I learned a lot about netcraft and from Bots about like walking into a court and looking at whether the nets are square shaped or diamond shaped, or double netted at the bottom, or how are the corner posts set up, and what impact that might have on the game, and being able to then make adjustments to game plans based around what is right there in front of you, that if you don't look for it though, you don't notice it. And so he's really good at those detail type stuff. And he's a funny bastard, and so that he fitted in really well with our group, because he could do that sort of funny. He would be pretty tough, but he'd also he would sit back with the guys and have a beer or whatever. So that was a very different contrasting style. Another guy who I've worked with quite a, and whether I have guys as assistant coaches to me, or I work as an assistant coach to them. So guys like Lee Ball, I was an assistant coach with him at the 2007 World Cup when he was coaching the under-19 girls. And Lee's another. He's a super analytical guy. He's he's got a lot of emotion that he brings into the sport, a lot of passion that he brings into the sport. But super analytical. And some of the game plans that he brought up, there was a couple of the players in the team who were really not very strong with their bowling at all. And he came up with some really innovative fields and some stuff that really compensated for their weakness and allowed them to just try and get some confidence into their own game about it, as well as their teammates having confidence. Rather than ducking for cover type stuff when they were bowling. And so learning from that about how do we look at this and take, rather than trying to hide a weakness, how do we actually turn a weakness into something that we can build an attacking option out of. So he was another one. I'm blessed to have a lot of really good captains in a lot of my sides, both within the ACT side. Billy was my captain for a number of years within the ACT sides. Another guy, Jamie Droney, was another guy who was a great captain for me. Coming over here to New Zealand, I was blessed to have Lee as captain in a lot of my teams, both at club level and at international when I started doing the Masters sides.
Who's the top of your list? Who's the best captain you reckon, and why? Like, what was it about them? Who's the best leader?
It had come down to between two people. One would be Lee, and the other one would be Jude Coleman. So I coached Jude for a couple of years. I say coach Jude. I'm not sure that that's actually probably the right
Mate,
terminology.
she's the goat. She's the
Yeah,
goat, mate.
yeah,
She's the
yeah.
absolute goat, Jude Coleman.
So
No doubt.
I took over the Australian women's side after Brad Ziller, and they'd had under Brad they had Donna Dalby or Donna Richardson as captain for a number of those years, and I think even at the start he might have had one of the New South Wales schools, but Donna's another one who's just an amazing captain, an amazing leader. But I never had the privilege of coaching her. But Jude came in, and I had a long conversation with Brad and a few others about who should be the next captain, because when Brad moved on, Donna retired. At that stage, she made a comeback a few years later, but so I was losing my captain or losing the incumbent captain, and so I had to have a choice as to who would be the new captain of the side. And there was a couple of people who were probably front runners. All of them ended up probably being Hall of Famers or Australian Hall of Famers. Cindy Cross was another person that was right up there as a potential captain, but Jude had only been in the side I think 1 or 2 years beforehand, and coming through, but she stood out to me as being the right person, and so she was my captain, and I was able to work really well with Jude, but I didn't coach Jude. I gave space to Jude, and she did what she's really good at doing.
What was it about it though? Like, you said she stood up, like, or stood out as being the best person for the job. Like, what was it you noticed?
So what playing? So Jude was absolutely a standout player, and that was when she was emerging as being a world's best. At that stage, and she probably stepped out of the shadows of a few of the players that had come before her, and she was an amazing player on the court. She was a great bowler, great bat, a great bowler and an emerging bat. She got better and better and better, but fielding wise, so Jude had a wide frame, and she used it really well. The way that she took over that front court. I can't count on fingers, toes, or every other appendage how many times I've seen her get runners trapped against nets or pushed into traffic because of how aware she was, and all the time that wasn't her focus wasn't on doing that trapping. Her focus was on fielding the ball and completing a wicket, but her court awareness and presence meant that a byproduct of that was that off the court, Jude was someone who could talk very well at all sorts of levels with all sorts of players. She was very respected within the group because of her playing abilities, and also because she was a teacher, was her job at the time, and she was also coming through the ranks of outdoor cricket as well. She was inspirational. She was someone who did a lot of stuff about do what I say, do what I do, not what I say. And she didn't do a lot of finger pointing and blah blah blah. She did when she needed to, but she was one that just again allowed people around her to do what they needed to do best. Didn't allow anyone to settle for a second-rate effort. Would always be pushing and helping people along. That group, I was, just as a side story, at the 2007 World Cup in England, we ran up against a really strong South African team. They were probably 2006 and 2007. They were probably the best side in the world, the South African women's team. They had another inspirational leader in Alta Kotza, she was just an amazing leader, and things like they would go into in World Cup in England, even though it was in England, it was actually a South African World Cup. It was all run by South Africans because the South African Action Group had come in and bought over a number of the centres, including the one where the tournament was being held.
Right.
And so it had a very South African feel to the tournament. But they would go, the South African women would be, they would be in the changing rooms beforehand, and they would be singing their anthem, and you know, they were just a really tight unit. During the World Cup, we'd lost twice to them, one in the round robins, one in the major semi-final. And this was after the previous year where we'd lost twice to them in a quad series tournament in South Africa. And we only beat them once in the 3 games the year before, and that was in the final of the quad series. And then at the World Cup, we'd lost to them twice already, came to the grand final, and we were going out for a walk in the morning. Every day we'd go for a walk, just to, you know, everyone wakes up, we go out, we do our walk together, do some stretching along the way, that sort of stuff. And I think it was Jude. I actually never found out, but I suspect it was Jude and potentially Nicole Martin, who's another great leader, who really strong within the Victorian side, and then also within the Australian women's side as well, coming through. But as we were walking, and you know, we weren't fearful at that stage, but you know, being an Australian side, you don't want to be the first Australian side to lose a World Cup, and we weren't. We hadn't been that successful against that South African team up until that point. And then, but as we were walking, you know, we weren't fearful, but you know, everyone was probably nervous. That's probably, you know, at least nervous, if not worried. But as we were walking around, the girls kept picking up pennies. And it was, and then they had this little saying, like, it's like, you know, something about luck, and finding a penny, find good luck, was something. So every time, and then this mantra came, and it was just really strange that on that day, as we were walking, that just about every one of the players was able to find a penny as we were walking around, and I'm sure that it was either Jude or Nicole that was actually seeding these coins out for the girls to pick up and to then be able to, you know, it was just a mental switch thing, and just brought in a little bit of levity, a little bit of fun to the day, and everyone's going, oh, how lucky is this, and so we were able to then take that out, and then there was a few tactical things that we did differently in the final, and that's how that team had a couple of players who are now had Mignon Dupree, had Marazan Cup, who are both in the outdoor world now, are just like killing it in the outdoor world. Marazan must have been, she would have been 17, 18, and Mignon was not much older, and they were gun players then and coming through. But yeah, so as leaders, Jude did things off court that had a direct impact on court as well. And so that the pennies was sort of one of those things as well, that, you know, we didn't need to be talking about technical and you know, you need to, you know, we need to bowl better, or we need to do this better, or do that better. We needed to change the thought processes and the feelings, and take away the negativity and bring in some positivity to then make a difference. And I had nothing to do with that. I'm taking no credit at all for it. That was absolutely the leadership group within that team, and I'm sure that Jude had, and that was one of her qualities. She was great player, just a really genuine good person, and she could relate really well with everyone. Rat is he's a very different type of leader, and so all through my early career, I used to always do the bowling. I would do the bowling and be feeding it in over by over to the captains, or with ACT sides, we had like the soccer transfer things, you know, for soccer where they put the number of the player coming off. Yeah. So we used to have those on the sidelines where we'd hold them up, and so everyone would know and see that's who the next bowler was going to be. With Lee, his on court analysis, his tactical ability to get a feel for right and wrong was such that I just put full trust in him as a leader on court and as a player to be able to say, well, I don't need to be telling you who the bowlers are. You'll do as good, if not better, a job than I will. And so he was really, really good at being able to do that. He was he's a planner. Was, maybe still is, quite a planner as well. I know for most games, I would the team list, as with as much notice as I could, the night before or whatever, and he would go through and sort out sort of a rough plan of what his bowling orders were going to be, who was going to bowl to which pair batters and that stuff, and then he adjusted as he went. But he was always very planned around that. He was very down the line. Lee is one of the guys he's one of the best trainers that I've ever seen. I spent a lot of time with Vinesh Bennett. He came across to ACT after being with New South Wales for a while, and Vinesh is another guy whose preparation is, well, it's legendary, and that's what made him, the amazing player that he is his work ethic and his preparation. Lee's another guy. I often use Lee as an example when so things like throwdowns. I'm not a great throwdown guy as a coach. I don't see a lot of benefit around throwdowns, and I always open it up to players. Do you want to do throwdowns or not? Because players either do or don't like them. But Lee did do a lot of throwdowns, but he was so structured around it. So he would have, how much time we got, Hardy? Okay, you got 10 minutes. It's going to be 2 lots of 5 minutes. So he would go through, and so the first 2 minutes would be straight bat, just moving front foot, going through. Then the next 2 minutes would be feed the ball to him outside off, and he'd work on his offside down up. Then the next 2 minutes would be for a leg side shot or a drive but he was really, really structured around that and really focused about what he did. And that focus and that work ethic flowed out to the teams that he was involved in. And you're starting to see that with when he was coached the 21s in Dubai, and now taking it into the men's side. You can see that work ethic that's coming through. You can see that attention to detail, and so that's as a leader, that's what really brings him out. And he plays through pain. Not that I recommend that and tell anyone that they should play through pain, but that's he's done that. The World Cup in South Africa, when we won the 30s, we were in the semi-final, and hopefully Lee doesn't get upset with me. Actually, I think most people know that there was some stuff going on there. So during the semi-final against Australia, where they were way in front going into the last pair, and we'd sort of thrown a lot of this was the major semi-final, so the winner goes straight to the grand final. Loser was going to have to play against, we knew it was going to be South Africa later on. And Lee had a dodgy belly. We don't know whether it was food or something else, but I mean, he was literally shitting himself on the court. And we got to the point with going into the last pair, they were about 20 in front, the last pair, already 20 in front. And Lee had bowled his couple of overs. No, he bowled one. He bowled one over, and he had one over left. And it was like, they were so far in front. It's like, we're going to have to play a game this afternoon against South Africa. Do we get Lee off the court? Lee was having none of that, and he stayed on, bowled a really good over. I can't remember if it was the 13th or 14th. And we took, so they were 20 odd in front going into it, and we took that game down to I think it was the last ball. And we lost by about 1 or 2 on the last ball. And so that was just an example again. And everyone on the court knew what Lee was going through. And he just he just stuck at it. He just did what he needed to do for the team, and he's a guy who's very much again another lead by example. You know, he didn't do a lot of preaching, didn't do a lot of telling. He just led by example a lot of the time, and he's got a massive manner. I mean his presence, both internally within the group, but also externally is huge. And you know, he'll always be someone who, if I'm looking at a class leader, he's one. His style won't always work for everybody, but it always worked within the teams that I had, and you know, I'd back him any day of the week.
What he spoke about, you know, part of the captain's role on the court and decision of bowlers and things like that. Like, you know, I've been a spectator of, you know, New Zealand indoor teams over the last few years, which has been great, and a couple of times been able to commentate and that sort of things, which I've been very privileged to do. And like you say, you know, in the box seat, there's no better seat unless maybe you're in the umpire's box. But I do see the role of the captain being limited somewhat by different coaching groups that I've come across. And of course, you're never privy to what's going on inside. It might very well be the way the captain would prefer it. You know, take this off my hands. Can you look after that coach on the sideline? You'd be better at it. I'll take care of this on court. You know, do you think it changes depending on who that leader is? Because I've played with captains that that read the game on the spot, if not had predicted what's coming up on court that coaches could never feel. And so they'll make decisions based on that. They'll see something instinctively and make a call on it. Like Darren Crook's one of those sort of captains. And albeit it's only really been at a club level that we've played together as captains, a little bit with Masters as well, but he's an instinctive captain. You know, he's a guy who will make a call on the spot. You know, and it's not that he's, you know, those captains are always part of the preparation group. Of course, there's you know, that tactical preparation pre-game with the coaching group and leadership group or whatever that looks like. You know, so those decisions are always going to be formed out of that preparation stuff. But sometimes I sort of feel like, well, I'm not going to name names. It's not about that. But you just see captains always looking off to the side to the coaching group to see who next. What should we do next? And then the message that sends to the rest of the group or doesn't send to the rest of the group can be left wanting sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's a good observation. And as I said, when I first started, I used to do that. And then I think part of it is the coaches trust in themselves, and part of it is trust in the team, and what sort of relationship they've got with between the captain and the coach. And I think you're right as well. There are times when sometimes the captain just goes, look, I want to watch and see what's going on and just be immersed in the game. And so I don't want to have that, be having to think about in the back of my head, you know, oh, you know, who hasn't bowled yet? You know, what overs have I got to get rid of? You know, do I need to get rid of this guy now or not, or whatever? Sometimes they do want that. But other times I think it is absolutely, it's about the coach wanting to have some control, quite often because they're either new or nervous about it themselves, and wanting to be able to influence, have an influence on the game. And that's something that you've got to grow up of. You know, you can't you know, you don't just walk into even into a, you know, as an international coach. Normally, as an international coach, you will have done, you know, X number of domestic tournaments, whether it be, and you know, in New Zealand, whether it's tri-series or provincials or, you know, whatever our structures are at the time. You must have come through and done quite a few campaigns and tournaments at that level, and had some success and so forth. But you still, I think the same as a player. When you take, every time you take a step up in level, you've always got a bit of a thought behind you. Am I good enough for this level? Am I right? And how do I show that I'm good enough? So often that way to show that you're good enough is by taking over.
But one of the best I've seen at not doing that until he's been asked is Paul Anderson, where his mentality to me, and in talking to him and playing with him and around him, is that he's always a player led. He's got a player led mentality. So the players lead, and he goes, "What do these guys need? If they ever need it, I'm the guy who's got to have it for them." And so, if someone does look to the sideline to him, he'll call it, and he'll give his his thought on it. It's never this is what's happening attitude. It's here's my thought on it. Bowl this guy. And if he's not needed, he's more than likely. I've got a great example as well. He's more than likely called it anyway in his head. He's already knows what's going to happen next. He's got a great story. He pulled it out on the podcast actually, and I just can't remember which game it was. I think it was the Masters in Birmingham, the final, and he called 14 of the 16 overs that Aussie bowled at us. So his pre-game analysis, his scouting, scoping of the other teams was second to none, and it was only there if the players and the captain needed it. And that was his mentality, not and I think you're quite right, where maybe someone's second guessing themselves and going, hey, I need to place a respect stamp here somehow, and so what I'll do is I'll make some calls, I'll get them right, and then the guys will look back at me and go, okay, we've got trust in him now, whereas someone who's a bit more mature, with all due respect, within that role will find out what's best for that group.
Yeah, 100%. And and that's something Andy had, that was, he'd come off South Africa where we'd won, and we did exactly the same thing in South Africa. We knew who they were going to bowl, what they were going to do, and it is just, but again, it's one of those things that some players will want that information and some don't. So both the crooks, actually, and I didn't talk about BJ, who has captained a lot of the club sides and provincial sides for me, and he's another guy that I just step back. I don't get in the way of his captaining because he's got a better feel on the court than what I will have. I can feed him information and give him stuff that outside of the game, but in the middle of the game, just let him go because he's another good leader, another great leader.
What do you, when you look at the really good players around an indoor, I suppose we're talking elite level here, what do you reckon makes, what's the difference between someone being really, really good and great, like the best around?
Oh, good question. I think there's a huge amount of differences. So some of the people who I consider to be the greatest, I have Guna, Craig Foster is someone who I consider to be the greatest. He's been a very long-term contributor. Back in that '95 World Cup, I think, I don't know how old he must have been at '95 World Cup when he first played. I think he was 17, 18.
17, 18, yeah.
Yeah, and and he's still playing. He's still playing at an elite level now. 26 years later on, and Craig knows his game really well, and he so no one has better hands than no one has better hands than Guna at the back stumps, and he gets himself in good positions. He reads the ball well, and gets from there. I think his bowling is right up there with as an attacking weapon with the best of it. And it's one of these things too. Guys like Chicken and Guna, and that if we take them outside of New Zealand, and they are absolutely phenomenal. They are nearly unplayable when we take them outside of New Zealand. people see them here in New Zealand because we play against the same people year after year after year. I mean, Gooner's been, as we just talked about, he's been on the scene. Well, it was in the New Zealand side in '95, so he would have been playing Tri-Series 2 or 3 years before that. So he's probably had, close to 30 years of playing Prem, whether it be at club level or above. And so people get to see these people all the time, and they discount, I think, how good these people actually are. Because you give someone 10 years to look at someone, and we'll come up with an okay plan to be able to get through, your bowling. You take that North Harbour team with yourself and Crooksy, Jason, there's probably no better team nearly in world cricket that has a better back eight than that North Harbour side. But over time, it gets a little bit less effective as people come up with strategies to combat it. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to be fully successful, and great bowlers will continue to get good results. But that's, I think, when we talk about the greatest, it's these people who've been really successful for a long period of time.
What makes them though? I really want to. I'd love to get everybody's opinion on this, or what really makes like Dion Muir, for example. Like the first time I came across him was in '98 World Cup in Melbourne. And funnily enough, I've just come across some video footage and tested it out last night, and it bloody works. The video is actually still working on it. It's a bit grainy, but it was TV coverage. And so I'm going to transfer it over. But Muir was on there in one game against us and got 33 personal with the bat, 1 out, 8 ball overs. But the guy was first, it was his first tour, like him and Corey, I think, were the two young bloods in that team, perhaps. And I may have that wrong with Dion, but he was really new still.
Yep.
But what makes a guy like that? Because it's not just talent.
Would have been, so that probably would have been Dion's second tour. I think he went across to South Africa. There was a tour to South Africa in '97.
Okay.
That went across to. But what I think the big difference with those with the greatest, and I'm talking about like Gooner, like Rat, people like yourself, someone like a Sonny. Sonny, I think is very underrated in terms of his contribution to us at for New Zealand at top level. I think he was probably mid-20s in terms of test matches. So not he wasn't massively up there. And I apologise because there's a lot of people who I'm not going to talk about because they were guys like Billy Murray. I think I had one viewing of Billy when he played for me in that 2005 or 6, and he's talked about how great he is, but I didn't see him over an extended period, so I can't. And same with someone like Robbie Kerr. I can't. I know that they are great, but I didn't see them firsthand. Whereas a lot of the Australians I did see firsthand. But I think that the thing that makes them great is they knew what their strengths were, and they trusted themselves and stuck to their strengths. They didn't try and change their game to suit someone else. They put a stamp on and said, this is me, this is my game, this is how good I am, and I'm just going to do it. And that wasn't done in an arrogant way. That was just done in a way that they had that outward belief. Now, who knows what's going up in here, and you've had conversations with some of the other in some of the other podcasts in terms of Toddy and others in terms of what players present out. Yeah. And what's actually going on inside their heads can be completely different.
Yeah.
But I think that's it's that ability to show outwardly the confidence, and it's one of those things too that if you what you physically show can affect what you're mentally thinking and doing as well. And if you do it enough and trust it enough physically, it can start to flow back inside. You know, and you've got that tension going on between the inner voice, the outer voice, and you know, at some point one of them's going to win if you keep sticking at it, and you hope that it's the one for good, but that's not always the case. And you know, there's guys look through. But someone like a Nick de Grease, I coached against Nick for many years, and actually I'll go back another example. Ty Hopes. Ty Hopes was in my first Australian junior team that I coached. We came across to Christchurch, and we were playing under 19 World Series at the same time as the Masters World Series was on down in Christchurch, and Ty was in my side that year. We had a gun side. We had a great side, and we went through. I think we won every game by about 50, 60, 70 on that year. We were a great side. Ty, I didn't he got player of the series, but I didn't play him in the final because we were so dominant. He didn't show some of the other attitudes that I thought he should have shown, and I missed how good a player he was. And he went on to have a great international career. You know, played in I think 2 or 3 World Cup winning sides. Very hard to pick as a spin bowler. Really good bat. You know, and that WA side had guys like Nick and Ty and a few others over the years, but they played the game differently than a lot of others. A lot of the other Australian sides are, you know, they're disciplined, and we do this and we do this, and you know, there's quite a structure. The Western Australian sides, you know, they were the guys, and this was back, you know, Greg Matthews' time and before, and you know, as you say, rest in peace for Greg. And he was, you know, he was the guy who was likely to be out at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning at the casino, and then turn
bit more
up
dynamic.
yeah, and turn up at 9 o'clock the next morning and have an absolute
and bash it.
Yeah, you know, he would just be, yeah, he was amazing. But they had that sort of culture where they would, you know, they just didn't do things the way everyone else said that you had to do it. They did things differently, and they, you know, in that early 2000s, Western Australia won, I think, 3 out of 5 years, and they were different from everyone, and their best players were different from everyone. And so I think that's what made them really good, was that they were just themselves. You know, here's my strength, here's my stuff, I'm going to go out there. They backed their abilities, and they didn't take knocks to him. Vinesh Bennett, he's another guy who, what's made Vinesh amazing is his discipline, his mental strength, and his work ethic. So he played for 3 or 4 years in New South Wales. Made the Australian side for 2000 and I'm going to say 6. No, 2007, when they went to South Africa. Off the top, I'm just trying to think. No, 2006, went across to South Africa, which is the only other series that the Australian men have lost. They've lost once to New Zealand in '89, and then they lost a series to South Africa in 2006. And VB was part of that side. He'd been playing for New South Wales. He and I had been, we had a game where up in Townsville, he was playing for New South Wales and fielding in the back, and I'm coaching, and I used to be a loudmouth, you know, and get involved in the games a little bit more than I do
Used to be.
now. Used to be. And I don't sledge at all.
Neither.
I used to be. And then VB and I were like either side of the net. There was just only a net in between us, and he's yelling obscenities at me, and I'm yelling obscenities at him. And you know, we hated each other. And then we sat down. I was coaching the Australian women. He was playing for the Australian men. It was his first tour. They lost. There was all this sort of stuff around that team. And VB was rooming with Darren Richards, who junior. this thing about family. Darren Richards, who played a couple of World Cups for Australia from Canberra, he got called Junior. His nickname was Junior. That started because my wife and I at the time would pick him up from home or school and take him to training sessions and stuff for us. He was that young when he came through, and we would do things like he would have to do spelling stuff for us. We'd give him a word and he'd have to learn how to spell it and that sort of stuff. So he got called Junior, and that nickname stayed with him throughout his Australian career. VB and I were talking, and he was just saying, look, he was looking at the way that we did things in ACT, and we seemed to have this family, we seemed to have this stuff, and VB that was just what VB needed at that time. And so he moved from Sydney, he moved down to Canberra, and that's when he started up doing his business and started making his bats and things like that. I won't mention the brand because Down Up is a far better.
You can stick around, bud. Maybe that's why Vinesh won't talk to me. The last 3 or 4 podcasts I've done, he's always been the first to come through. His insights and comments, which are lovely comments. Like he's been really really nice, but he won't come on the podcast. So I'm not worthy. One day maybe, VB.
He can't. He is absolutely. He's just one of these guys that, again, lives and breathes his indoor cricket. He thinks about the game. He works on it. If he thinks he's got a weakness area, and 2016 when we went across to Port Macquarie and played against them, we won. That was like the first 2 with the Prem side, and we knocked them over in a couple of the tests, including the very first test of that series, and we just did a job on them with our bowling. I've spoken to VB later on, and he said we had them scared at that stage because of we just had a great bowling attack. We had a game plan that suited our team. We were lucky enough to have guys like Michael Barry and Nav Patel and Butsy was bowling good quick lines at that stage, and
Phil Tunnicliffe as well was going well.
Phil bowling quick, but also bowling the Colsey off cutter that which and we talk about technical stuff. I could never teach the guys how to bowl a great leg cutter, and that's where we bring in people like yourself who come in and show them, and then the good players take advantage of that. And really, and Tunny used to, he made that ball his own. He didn't bowl. He bowled an off cutter. He didn't bowl the Guy Coleman off cutter.
No, he bowled different. It's good.
Yeah, and he just made it suit him. But VB just works and works and works, and he went, I'm not going to get caught out by pace next year. And so I knew that the next year that pace to him was not going to be as big a weapon as it was the year before him. Now, it doesn't mean that it wasn't going to still be a weapon against the rest of the Australian team, because I don't think the rest of the Australian team work as hard as VB. They work, but not as hard as VB. He is the hardest working indoor cricketer that I've ever known, and he will always be the only person who works as hard as what he does.
There's two things about why players why those good players are great, right? And this is only my take on it, and there'll be more that comes out that as I talk to different people, the same question that'll come up with different things. But first thing is, I reckon that the great players tend to as they go up the levels, they become a better player.
Yep.
And there's a few cases. There's actually guys who've got caught out of not being the reverse of that. So they're great players, the lower levels, and then as they get up the levels, they become a little bit more even though they show that greatness at the lower levels. And the other thing is that the great guys always seem to be evolving their games. There's always something to work on. They could be the best player in the world, but then they'll go away and start analysing. Much like you're talking about with VB, where he just works on different areas of game that he might have got caught out on. Hasn't had a massive effect on the game or his performance, but he's recognised it as something he doesn't want to get caught out again. And I think that the real great players just get they keep evolving their game and becoming better and better at different areas.
Yeah, just adding and just adding something different to their game, so that
Mm.
they become less. I think that they're not as predictable as other players. You know, am I going to be able to, so Chicken, he's got great cutters, and when he bowls those, and but his in swing is probably the ball that is a bigger weapon.
Mm.
And certainly as he's got older, that in swing has become a bigger and bigger weapon for him. And he's added that and improved upon it, because you can't be a one-trick pony. You've got to be able to have that extra side to it. But yeah, it's creating that whether it's longevity that's caused them to be great, or it's greatness that's given them the longevity. The two do go hand in hand, and to be able to be there for a long time, though, you can't be the same player for 5 years or 10 years. You have to be better. Sometimes it's not because they work, though. I think there's some of the really, really good players that actually don't work on the game. They just evolve. They are sort of more Darwinian in their evolving nature, and adapting. Whereas a VB he's an adapter. He's someone who takes conscious steps to make a difference. There are others that just evolve because they're that good at being able to read what's happening around them, that their game just evolves to match what they're seeing in this in the new age, or the different environment.
Who are your favourite players to watch, mate? Like
to watch,
what gets you out of bed? Like, no, not what gets you out of bed, but like over the years, like who have been the real true sort of players that have just been like eye-catching. You can't wait to see them. Like big ones for me were Jay Otto, and I love watching Rob Fitzgerald as well. I love watching him play. But Jay Otto was again, probably, if you want to start talking about GOATs, man, like I think he's in the conversation, and he's right up there, Red Dog, and bloody good dude with it as well. But who's there? Who really gets you excited when you're watching indoor? Past and present.
There's so many. So back in the day, Greg Matthews was absolutely, when I first sort of came onto that international scene. Mick Peters was another guy. He's a Tasmanian keeper, another tall keeper, along with Trevor Lindsay. Mick was he was a really good all-round player. He might have played in that same Test series that when Jofra and them came over, because that would have been in his era. There was a guy called Dougie Frame that played for Western Australia at the back stumps, and he was and again, sorry, Chicken, he had a chicken build. So he wasn't the most athletic build of a player, but man, at the back stumps he was like goons in terms of his hands and things like that. So watching those sort of guys back in the day, and Cumberbatch and that sort of era, John Mark Smirnoff playing for Victoria, were just phenomenal front court fielders. I had some AC, and it's hard to pull out some ACT guys, because that their family, it's like which of your kids do you love the most, sort of thing. But I had Billy and Preston, my brother. 97, my first year of coaching at Men's, they just emerged that year, and they were scoring like 35, 40 a pair, opening the batting, and they were playing very different from anyone else at that stage, because they were hitting a back net or two every pair, and we're just and Billy's like I think I'm only 3 or 4 years older than Billy, but he's like a younger brother or a son. He was quite young when he first came into sides, and I was coaching him for 15 years or so. I loved coaching Billy, and I loved watching him play and seeing how, when he made Australian sides and things later on in his time. Preston is a guy who never actually, there's the whole heap of other guys who are coaches juniors, Dwayne Hall, Darren Richards, who I just, and both of them both played for Australia as well. There's another guy by the name of Frankie Mason, who played in the last Masters World Series for the Australians in the 40s. And he's actually an ex-Kiwi. He moved over to New Zealand quite young. And so I didn't realise Kiwi until I came over here and we got talking. But Frankie's one of these guys. He was never an amazing player, and he'd be the same. He'll always talk himself down. But I just loved watching him play because he played with passion. He played with a smile on his face. He had energy. He was a guy that just wanted to play. He didn't care if it was win or lose or whatever. He just wanted to play. And so I love watching that sort of passion. VB's one of my favourite players to have coached. Both coached against and coached directly in New Zealand. Things like guys like Sonny and Guna, watching them do things like, there are times when I think, is it good or bad? So when they scored 100 against Singapore in the World Series that year that we won it, and there was a lot of feedback, who cares? It was against Singapore. It was this or that. It's like, well, no one else has done it at an international game. No one else has actually put the effort in and done it. And they didn't hit 1,000 back nets or anything like that. They just batted phenomenally. And they were two of the unsung players in that group. I loved coaching people like Rusty from Palmy. Rusty's he's just
Russell
a cool
Swindells,
kid. Russell Swindells, yeah. He's just a great guy, and he's one of these guys who, again, he's just passionate about the game. He plays it.
He's a grinder, He's just a grinder. He knows exactly what he can do, and that's all he tries to do every game.
Yeah, I loved coaching him. Loved watching him play. Rant is a guy who was great. I think, and then guys like Rowdy. I got to coach Rowdy for that one year when he played for the New Zealand A side. When it was in Wellington. He's another guy. Rob Sheary's another that Rob's. There's a few guys like Rob and Sonny who, when they're in your team, I think they're fantastic. When you're coaching against them, I hate them. There are so many things. Got like Rob and the pisser guys and some of the stuff that they do. I just look at that and go, you're just. But when you get them in your sides, and you see other things that you do, it's just like, and I just love that sort of interaction, and that guys who are really passionate about their team, their game, and they don't really care about anyone else. So I love watching. I love watching guys like. Actually, it's not just guys. I loved coaching people like Jude Coleman, Cindy Cross. There was Katrina Pym, now Katrina Teskey, who Lyle's wife. Katrina was a great player in her own sense, and sort of maybe put aside some of her own playing abilities as Lyle's career took off. Katrina was someone who polarized even within a team, but she was just, I thought she was a great player and a great person, again, because of passion. Nicole Martin from Victoria, she's a person, she's just a great person, and she plays the game really well. And she's got her own mannerisms and things like that. So those sort of players, there's so many I could I've been so lucky to coach a lot of players. And to be honest, it's players who I coach and have had that direct involvement with that I get the most buzz out of watching, whether it's while I'm coaching them or before or after I've been coaching them. Players that there's a whole heap of players that are great and really good players who I never actually had direct involvement with. So, I don't see them at that same level. And Australians are going to shoot me for it, but guys like Alan Wilson, who
Why would they shoot you for that? Because
they're going to shoot me for what I'm about to say.
Okay.
Because I never saw Willie as the greatest player. I thought he was a good player, but I never saw him as the greatest player. I thought there were a number of other guys. Now, his reputation, his record, his both with Queensland and with Australia are absolutely without doubt. He's right up there. But I never saw him as being. And Dion's another one. I think Dion's a great player, and Preston and others who've played with Dion in Australian sides and things. But I never saw him as quite the same player as what others did. And I think maybe that's because I spent all my time coaching against him and finding little ways to, do whatever we could to bring him back to a level. And so in my mind, I'm always thinking about him back a level, because of what I want him to be, not necessarily what I'm seeing him as.
Yeah, mate, you've got some blinkers on, because you haven't mentioned one Harbour player here and at all. And it's because you haven't coached us. You'd be naming all the Harbour players if you'd coached us one year, mate.
That's it. I never had the opportunity. You keep saying, "Hey, guy," I keep saying. Actually, all the Harbour players say no to me. Darren, I tried to get Darren into teams for, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. I tried to get Darren, and a couple of times he's sort of through different things going on in life. He's I'd have loved to have had you guys in sides. I'd love to have coached Hermie. Again, a couple of times he said no to me. So it's so yeah. No, Harbour's Harbour's. Yeah, it's just dropping.
We're okay. We're just okay. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. we won't talk about domestic records or anything like that.
Sure. Hey, with Wilson, the first time I ever saw him was in the '98 World Cup, where he was the captain, and him and just our style of play compared to Australia was so Neanderthal, really, the way that we just played cricket. The only guy who really batted that combated Australia was Robbie Kerr, and that's just because he was just a phenomenal batsman, and he could really match it with them. But I watched Berger and Wilson and just thought, wow, as a partnership, how are you ever getting through this? And it's not discounting the other guys that were in that side, like Peter Schliebs and Neil Hansey, and those guys were fantastic bats. Greg Matthews again was in there. But Wilson and Berger, man, they were absolutely outstanding. And to be honest, probably only one partnership would rival them now, and that's Fitzy and VB. From what I've seen of Fitzy and VB, I wonder whether they're probably the best we've ever seen as an opening partnership, or as a partnership in general.
Yeah, it's interesting. Berger's another one who. So we used to play.
It's Craig Berger, yeah, for those out there who don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, Craig Berger, and Craig Berger for Australia, not one of the many Bergers that played for South Africa.
Yeah.
So Craig used to play for, I can't remember which club he played for in Victoria, but we used to have this challenge series. It was a 6-a-side comp played in a little country town called Albury, which is actually where I was born. And which is about 2 or 3 hours from Melbourne, 2 or 3 hours from Canberra. And every year they'd have this Easter Carnival where it was 6-a-side, it was a cash comp. And we would bring teams from Canberra up. It was just a bunch of guys that had come in, and Berger used to play for one of the teams that came there. And so I grew up, my early indoor cricket beginnings were growing up destroying him, and playing in teams and him not doing that well, and then as we then started, that was before I was involved with any of the state stuff, and then I started getting into coaching the men's sides, and Bergs was playing for Victoria and carving up, and I'm thinking, how does that guy who was doing this and this is one of those things that you're talking about with guys who go up a different level, play on a higher level, and just get better and better because of the level around it. And he was absolutely one of those guys. He would play rubbish cricket and play rubbish. He'd go into into a state championships, a national championships, into a World Cup, and each time he got better and better as he went up in those levels. So it's yeah. And there's lots of those Queenslanders who I didn't mention, Corey and Jay and those guys that were just, Troy Gursky's another guy that's really, truly underrated. He was a great player for Queensland, a great captain for Australia. I'm just my only regret personally is that I didn't spend more time with here in New Zealand before I came. So I missed out on a whole heap of those early New Zealanders. Actually, another great leader, great captain in her time was Lucille Matthews. She, and with that side that I was involved with Lee Ball, she was captain of that team, and she's a great leader as well. Another player. There's a lot of those women's players that great to they play a different game and just stand out. I missed out on some of the people like that came through in the women's game before my time here in New Zealand. So Antoinette Spain came out. There was and the names just dropped out of my head. It came out of Canterbury. Was captain of the women's team for a number of years.
Helen Watson.
Yes. Yeah.
ET. Yeah. She was exceptional, man.
Yeah. I only saw the end of her career, and I would have loved to have seen seen her playing at her absolute peak, and some of those and then you get some of these other players, like Tash Williams, another phenomenal leader, and she's going to do some amazing things with that New Zealand women's team. If we get an opportunity for her to get that team,
it'll happen. Yeah. There's a lot of girls back in. It's funny you brought up Antoinette Spain. Her, Rocky Nicholson, Shona Wilson. I could rattle off a few of those, those older ladies that were like the men back in those time were, true pioneers of New Zealand indoor cricket, and unfortunately because, they're just not around the sport, bar Tash and, Rocky's still, poking her head around as well, which is great to see her still involved, or up to that Trans-Tasman she was involved in. It's those players that those sort of get forgotten a little bit. And, again, the motivate, I've said this before on the podcast as well. Sorry, people, but it's the reason why I did this is because those people aren't forgotten, I'm hopefully catching up with Maya Lewis soon. I can find some time, and with her as well. I'm really keen to do one of these with her. Just want us to get out of lockdown so we can do these face-to-face, man. These these sort of Zoom calls, they're a means to an end, but I'd love to just be able to sit in front and of each other and get through a podcast. It'll be amazing. Look, I've got a couple of things here. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, wouldn't it be cool to get some of those old teams together, have 3 or 4 people together, whether it be someone out of one of those women's teams or a couple of the guys, or 3 or 4 people, and just let them talk about the stories about the tour and something, what stays on tour, what goes on tour stays on tour. Just those little, I remember when, in that game and this sort of stuff. And then that sort of triggers, one memory triggers another memory, and hearing guys that you can get that play with more than that, just a couple of people talking through and just capture some of that. Yeah,
that definitely needs to happen in the studio though. Can't do that. It's a bit of a shit fight over a Zoom call, I think.
Absolutely.
I'm keen to. I'll do. Well, hopefully Keith and Wayne, we can get them together. Wayne lives down the other end of the country now, but I'd love to sit in a room with those two, man, because I don't think I'd have to talk too much. Mate, I've got a bit of a direction I want to go in with you, and it's double-sided, and I suppose if we need to you'll bring out one side of it, and it might make the other side of it a little bit controversial. But hopefully, it doesn't come across like that. And I think you're pretty good with your words, so I think you'll be pretty good with it. But I do want to run through the adversity of you being told, after the Dubai World Cup that you are no longer required as a New Zealand coach. I mean, how did you go through that period? And I know you and I have had a conversation over the phone about it before, and there was some questions unanswered on your side, and you weren't too sure as to the reasons why or things like that. I mean, where's your mind on all of that sort of now?
So I never actually got told that I didn't have the job. I got I got a phone call. I got a phone call to say, ask me the question, am I available to coach the under 21s? And I went, no, I didn't apply for that. I applied for the men's. And that
so this is after. So just to give people a bit of a rundown. So this was after the 2017 Dubai World Cup. Is that right?
Yep. So the following year, so all the appointments were done. I suppose World Cup to World Cup, and so 2000 so that was 2017 World Cup. So this would have been 2018. There'd been a couple of tournaments, I think. Like in domestic tournaments, I think there was a junior provincials that had been held, and then there was a board meeting, New Zealand board meeting, where they were doing the appointments, and so I'd applied for the men's side, and there was no interview or no conversation around the application about what do I need to put into an application, or plan or whatever, that sort of stuff. That was just a sort of a one pager that you were asked to put in. So I never really got any I got no feedback about why I didn't get the job, or where I was deficient or any of that sort of stuff.
How were your performances like before the World Cup, and your legacy with the team? Like, it hadn't gone that badly, man. You made the World Cup final, and it went in some pretty tough trying conditions, and in Dubai, and against lost a final against a very, very good side in Australia.
Yeah, I don't know. My record it'll sit there, and I mean, it's not my record; it's the team's record. But we went from a stage where the World Cup beforehand in 2014, our men's side had lost to the A side, lost to South Africa a number of times during that one, and got absolutely smashed in the final by Australia. So we, and none of that I think was anyone's fault or whatever. But I strongly believe that during that time we were getting to the point where the desire for people to be involved in the New Zealand setup had been waning. There wasn't quite the same buzz around the side and around the team that there had been way back, and that was probably the one thing that I really wanted to return, was to return a bit of mana back to the side, to set up a culture of performance, to really make competition for spots a lot harder, and people wanting to put their hands up for it. We did that. We had the series at Macquarie. We did really well. We won 2 out of 5. We were took them and took 4 tests for us to lose the series, and then we were able to, in the last game of the series, take another win. So we had that. It was a good result for us. To be fair, I probably made a few mistakes in that series, in that main focus on that was learning about a bit more about the Australians, and so I made sure that everyone played a whole. We had a lot of younger guys come through into that team, and we rotated people all the way through. We didn't give test caps out just for the sake of it. everyone who got a game deserved that game. But I absolutely, we also, and I say we because Bots was part of it as well. He absolutely did not go into it going, we're only going to play, if we win the first test, we're only going to play that same 8 every game sort of thing. We had a squad of 12. I wanted all 12 guys to get some taste of international cricket. And I think we could have won that series if we had have not changed and given lots of guys opportunities that we did do. And I think it was actually good for us though, because it put a lot of belief. Every player that went on that tour played in a team that beat Australia. So we had a lot of belief coming out of that going towards Dubai. Dubai was a good tournament for us again. The only team that we lost to Australia, which is, I think it was the first World Cup for about 3 or 4 World Cups where the side didn't lose to a South Africa or a second. I think 2014 lost to South Africa and to New Zealand A. 2011 had lost the side had losses against the South African second side as well. So performance-wise, I don't think performance was anything in there in terms of the team performance. So I don't know. Maybe it was there's something about they wanted to make a different direction. Lee had done a good job with the 21s that year in Dubai, and the powers that be made a decision. I was gutted by it. I moved over here to New Zealand 13 or 12 years before that with the sole purpose of getting to coaching that New Zealand men's side. I changed my life to do that. That was my sole purpose. I put a lot of energy, a lot of effort, a lot of money into doing that. To not get any feedback and also not really understand what I'd done wrong. That still hurts. But I've also now, it hurts, but I've moved on to it now. I'll look back. I'll look back at my time very fondly. I really enjoyed coaching that group of men. They were both. In fact, even going back to the 2014 with the New Zealand A side, there was a lot of similarities between that 2014 A side and then what we took to Port Macquarie and then on to Dubai. A lot of those guys are, I feel honoured and privileged to have had a chance to coach some of those guys. So yeah, it's tough. I still, I'd love to get another opportunity. I don't think I will. I think my time has passed now. I think there's guys like Andy that are, Paul Anderson that are, that are lining up as well, and he probably deserves an opportunity before I get a second one. I don't know whether I agree. I'd like to think I'm a good enough coach, but I think that's where it's going to be. And I think my time's done. I haven't retired. I came very close to retiring, or sort of retired after South Africa, the Masters. But you're a long time retired, so
is 2013. So if we talk about 13, is that your best coaching moment? Is that the highlight of the career, do you think, top of the peak, or is there another one that sort of stands a little bit more closely, like more to your heart?
So there's I've had 3 World Cup sides. So I coached the Australian women to a World Cup, Birmingham. That was pretty special again because it was 2 years where, I think that the South African women were a better team than us, and to be able to beat them twice in the games that absolutely mattered, that was pretty special. My first Australian side, when we came over and were dominant, that was a cool coaching moment. So internationally, those three sites. I've never had a better party than after 2013 in South Africa with that group of guys. We had a 2-day bender. It was just amazing.
Yeah.
In fact, my best ever indoor cricket memory, which actually has nothing to do with indoor cricket, came out of that tour. And that was, so we'd finished and we'd had the big night of celebrating, and we were in our own little compound, own place. We're the only people in this place, this lodge, and we had a pool and that sort of stuff. And there was a couple of guys, Nathan George, who was leaving pretty well the day after we'd won. And the most emotional thing, and in fact, I'm actually getting like there's a tear in my eye as I remember this moment, because Ginge was leaving. So the taxi was there to take him to the airport, and packed the bags. Were there, and the whole team has come up. We came up from the pool up to the car park, and the guys started doing the haka, and this was actually the first time that I'd ever done the haka, and we were doing it to say goodbye to our mate. And Ginge broke down in tears, and I've got him now. And as I remember, this is absolutely like the most amazing emotional thing I've ever had as being part of indoor cricket. And we said goodbye. We did the haka. We said goodbye, and then we went back to the party, but it just wasn't the same, because it wasn't. One of our mates was no longer there. And that's the forever. That will be the indoor cricket moment that stays with me. And for me, it epitomizes everything that I love about the sport of indoor cricket, is a group of people that come together and just love and trust and value each other, up to the point where we can where there are tears between grown men and hugs, and that tour, along with my last tour to South Africa coaching the 40 men, what is it now, 2 or 3 years ago now, 2 years ago, 2019, in a team that I wasn't supposed to be coaching. I wasn't going to be coaching at that tournament, because I was going to be I thought I was still going to be coaching the men's side and preparing for a Trans-Tasman and other things. And I came in and got that side quite late, and didn't have a lot of time we didn't have as much of a prep time, and there was lots of constraints around that side. But that team was probably the most, the EQ of that team was probably the highest of any side that I've ever been involved with. And we had that team. We talked about mental health. We talked about depression. We talked about family. We talked about it was life, with a lot of that group, which I'd never been there to that level with a team. Normally cricket tours are cricket tours. You have some fun, you have some drinks, you play hard cricket, you enjoy the time. With that group, we just went to a whole different level than I'd ever been to with a team beforehand, and it was just a credit to those guys that were in that side, like Ribsy, Dinger, Rusty. They just made a huge difference. And so those are the two tours that I will remember the most, and it actually had nothing to do with winning or losing. It was about the relationships, and about the differences that I could see that had taken for people's lives. I'd love to talk to, it's been a couple of years now from South Africa with those 40s guys, but I know a number of them have changed their friendships and or developed friendships that never existed beforehand, that can only come out of that environment. And that's but I'd love to now talk to some of those guys, because a lot of those guys I'd coached quite a few times. You know, there was guys like Jerry Wilson and Speedy and others who I'd coached in my first New Zealand 30 side. You know, what was that? Man, that was what, 2008 or so. So, you know, 12, 13 years ago. You know, I'd love to know what they thought the difference, you know, between me as a coach as well as the culture of the team, you know, over that period of time. But you know, those two, seeing Ginge, the Haka and Tears, and then last year, 2019 with that 40s. And I think 2019, possibly because I thought that was going to be my last tour. I really, you know, I still felt that you know, that was the end for me, and so there was a lot of emotion around it for me as well. But,
did you ever find out who turned the air conditioning on full bore one night and your bed blanket as well? Do you ever remember that?
I don't even know what happened. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, well, I've been told a story that you were on tour with someone and someone stitched you up, so you had to come back to your room after about 8 hours with the air conditioning on full whack, and your electric blanket was on full whack as well. And you've come home about 2 o'clock in the morning after a night out. You've had to sleep in the room. Maybe it's you don't remember that. Okay.
If I came home at 2 o'clock in the morning, I probably don't remember much at all of that.
Fair enough.
There's a whole heap of other stories about beds, which I'm not going to go into.
yeah. I do want to ask the other part of that question that I've got. What do you think of the New Zealand structure now and the setup and the way moving forward? Like, do you think we're on the right path? Is there, you happy with what we're sort of seeing outside the bubble looking in?
Are you talking generally, or the men's team in particular?
Men's in general. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's where you've had some involvement in the past, obviously, as well. But also, we've all got vested interest in our sport and where New Zealand's sort of heading as well.
Yeah, I think Rowdy and Lee are doing a great job. I think that they've got a really clear vision about how they want the team to go. They've harnessed an emerging group of players, and they're absolutely using, so it's really clear, what you need to do to make this side. You need to be a bloody aggressive attacking bowler, and the amount of heat that we've got, guys, the guys that are coming through, and the ability to use that is awesome. I think they're absolutely, they're going well. There's some things that they brought in that I'd been trying for even before I became the New Zealand coach. They've been trying to get things in place, and now they've finally been able to get them across the board, and all credit to them. Things like the internal tour. I've thought for a number of years that we should have something like a 3-year cycle in line with the World Cups, and that the year after a World Cup, it should be we should have an internal tour. And I saw it a little bit differently than the way that these guys are doing it. I reckon we should pick a New Zealand team, and then take that New Zealand team to play against Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, and not run away from the fact that people are going to be rooting not for the New Zealand team in New Zealand. They may well be rooting for Christchurch, or because that's only going to make our players better, because when we go away to World Cups, the other people on the sidelines aren't rooting for us. That when we're playing against Australia, they might. But when we're playing against most nations, the crowd's not rooting for us. They're rooting for the other team. And so having our players prepared to do it, and also by having an internal tour like that, it means that we get a wider range of players get exposed to the program. So I think that's a great thing that the two teams of 10 and bring in, which means 20 odd players get exposed to a program. It's a great building block. I think it's a really, really cool idea. On a second year, I think we need to we need to be having a provincials and a again, wider 5 or 6 teams playing in a provincials, and we have a Trans-Tasman or some other international series which gives players both a wider base at the domestic level, but also an opportunity to test at the international level. And then World Cup year, we shouldn't have provincials. We should have a tri-series, narrow the playing pool down to it. There's going to be some guys in some of those areas that are going to miss out on spots. Well, that's so be it. But if you've got the best 20 or 30 players fighting it out and it must be one of these things, make some tough decisions. Make that tri-series a thing where the players pay $1,500, $2,000 to play in the tri-series, of which $1,000 is their down payment for the New Zealand side, so that you've got the 20 or 30 players that are there are all committed to playing for New Zealand should they get selected, and they've already got a leg up because they've already made a payment. And it also funds the guys who don't make it. There's we either refund back the New Zealand portion, or some of it, and you use some of it to help to keep the cost down for the guys who travel away. And if you do it in the right way and it's clearly done, then I don't think you're going to run into a lot of opposition from other people, because if it's clear and transparent, everyone knows that they've got a chance. If they don't make it, they weren't good enough, and you can do that. And I see a lot of that stuff that Lee and Rowdy are doing, and I think it's wonderful. I think we are traveling in the right direction, and I'd like to think that that's building on some of the stuff that we've done in the last 2 or 3 years before that, and they've just taken it and made it their own and are working forward. I'm hearing that there's a good close relationship between Lee and Andy, and good discussions around what's happening at that at the men's level and that Colts level. That's a great thing. So I think there's some really cool things that are going on, and we as long as we've got a good plan, as long as we actually given an opportunity to be successful, rather than face a first setback and then go, oh, the plan was wrong, and then try and think, oh, what's the new plan? I think we've actually got to stick at something for a little while and give it the chance to develop and succeed. But yeah, I think they're doing well. I wish it was me. I absolutely wish it was me doing it. But I do think that Lee and what they're going with that team and where they're going with that level. I think it's good. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, I think they're blessed with a wider playing group than I think possibly we had even 4 or 5 years ago, because the new wave of guys coming through now that are really starting to tick some boxes. So it really gives Rowdy and Lee some options. They've still got that that broad sort of plan of structure of how they want a squad to look and the way they want to play, but they've got more players to choose from that could possibly fit within that as well, which I think is a really cool thing. I like the idea about the sort of I'm in sort of 2 camps here in my head. I like the idea of narrowing down in that 3rd year into a tri-series, but the thing is that you need to not just think about the men's level. We've got to think about the junior program coming through, and then also obviously thinking about the women's game and the junior program there as well. Whatever you're doing in the men's or the women's, you need it consistent. And I'd suggest we just might narrow down that group in the women's just a little bit too much. It's probably not I don't know. I think the thing is, at the moment, women's games in an area where they're really trying to grow the numbers, and they're actually doing a pretty good job with the amount of girls that are coming through. Even what I saw at the provincials, in the under-20s and 21s was great. It was awesome to see, and the player numbers are actually increasing. So I wouldn't want anything to come in that would actually jeopardise any of that.
Yeah, but I absolutely agree, but I don't think we're at the stage where turning the women's into a tri-series in that 3rd year would actually reduce the numbers, because at the moment we don't have much more than that already playing in those competitions. You know, I think we had 4 women's teams this year, and one of them was a sort of a combined side.
That's fair. Yeah.
So, but I 100% agree with you. We need to grow the playing before we can even think about contracting. We need to grow it, and it's only because we're at that stage now where we do have in the men's game that wider pool and a lot more competition, and also desire to be part of the program, that we can contract it. We don't want to do that, but it does need to be down through the levels as well. We do need to mirror it in the juniors, and you know, male and female, no difference at all, wherever we can. And you've just touched another thing, that one thing we've got coming through now is we've also got that both Andy and Lee will be able to take advantage of, is we've got a group of guys coming through that have played in successful under 17 World Cup sides. So we've got a group of younger guys that are coming in that'll be starting to push into Andy's team, and actually even into Lee's team, that have tasted success, that are not afraid, or don't have this aura around the Australian teams, because they've played against the Australian teams and beaten the Australian teams. They've played against the South Africans and beaten the South Africans. You know, they've come through and got success. And you know, someone like Nick Ward is probably the best New Zealand coach ever. If you look at his record, he's had a couple of under 17 programs. He took one to South Africa, where I think he was coaching with Sean Kelly, and they won the under 17s over in South Africa. And then when it was in Christchurch a couple of years ago, and Wardy was coaching the top 17 side, and they won that tournament, and they were dominant in that tournament, and won quite well. So, you know, I'd love to be seeing, you know, Wardy's still got a bit to offer as a player, but how do we harness some of his because he's got to have done something right, to have got the results. You know, not everyone who wins means that you're a great coach, but to have done it a couple of times, with some spacing between hand, means that there's got to be something in his head, something in the way that he's looking at the game, something in the way that he's worked through with those athletes, that means that he's got something to offer as well. And so how do we harness some of that and attract some of that back into our wider groups as well? So, you know, that's
the what I like coming through, and it is a little bit about, Nick always seemed to be someone who was a little bit no fear sort of cricketer. But they're the guys that are coming through, your Micah Conroys, like there's a myriad of players around his sort of level that were part of that junior program that won a few years back in Christchurch. They're no fear cricketers, man. They don't care who's coming up. They're not playing the guys at the other end, bowling the ball. They're playing the ball, and playing fearless, not worried about results. If they execute with a really strong, aggressive attitude, they'll more than likely succeed, you know. And it's it's a gold mine, you know. And I know that Lee and Rowdy will try and harness that as well, and give guys license to be themselves, you know.
Yep, absolutely. But and if you've got the nature of the game that they seem to be developing is going to lend itself towards that. So by being super aggressive with the ball, and you know, and being strong, you know, attacking, fielding, and you're really trying to put the pressure on, means that there potentially becomes some weaknesses with the bat, which means that there are going to be games where things don't go right. And so as long as they've got the mental strength within the group to go, okay, we didn't perform in this game, and that's why we've lost, as opposed to we've got it wrong and we need to try and change something new. Actually, no, they just write it off, and that got their mental ability to do that and just go, oh, we stuffed up, it's gone. That has no bearing on how I'm going to play the next game. I'm still going to play the next game in the same way, and the next game, just because it's the next game, I'm not going to have those 3 bowls or run outs or whatever it was that contributed to not so great batting performance, and that'll be the only area where with the bowling and the attack that they've got, they will be successful with the ball against any side. And they'll keep every team, the best Australian team, the strongest South African team, the emerging Indians and UAE sides, they'll keep those sides to 50, 60, 70 runs or less. All of those teams, and so it's just a case then of will their batting be good enough to get them over the line, and they've got some good players in there as well.
Yeah, there's I think there's still work-ons in that group, and like I say, it's not a critical point of view, but I'm 1,000 miles away from that group and what they're doing. But I do think when I look at an international level and I look at an Australian team and their strengths, our fielding abilities, our fielding skill sets are a step behind where Australia are at. If we could harness that, that could be the difference of us winning the next World Cup. Yeah. I think that if we can solidify guys in positions and be absolutely 100% in our execution under pressure in the field, I think that could actually end up being the tipping point.
Yeah.
Well, listen, man, that's nearly 2.5 hours, bro. That's a pretty good effort, man. It's the longest podcast I've ever done. Thanks heaps. It's so cool to see you again. You're looking amazing, man. You're looking really good and fit, and I really appreciate your time, and hopefully we can do this again. Really appreciate it, man.
Oh, super, mate. I love talking indoor cricket. It's been my life, and hopefully will continue to be my life for a little bit longer.
Hope so, man.
Sitting centre around and watching what's going on, and this is really cool. Like sort of both between yourself and what Hindo's doing. You both are got sort of different focuses around what the conversations are about. But it's really cool that this sort of stuff is going on. And one thing I'd say to you is make sure you don't lose the New Zealand focus on this. Really make it about capturing the history and the people and the what's made the game here so great. And stick around with a lot of so having a chat with BB would be awesome because he is great. He's a great cricket person, but there's lots of really cool Kiwis that would be awesome to get on here to talk about it. And people like Donks, Paps, some of the you said you got Maya coming in. She'll be an amazing someone like her, and then others like Weedy or Jess Ramage, and some of those other ones. You get Natalie Glove. She was an ex-broadcaster. Did a bit of time back in the day with what was she on? Where she bought the beige jacket to one of the Tri-Series tournaments, and they did Crowd Goes Wild. They had brought Crowd Goes Wild down and did a few interviews and things like that at one of the Tri-Series way back in the day.
Remember that?
Yeah. Awesome. So those are all those sort of people that the Anokas, and you've had Toddy, and someone like an Obber, or some of the other, but even some of the people that are maybe never been the fantastic international players, but certainly have a profile or a reputation locally as well. The local legends, the people that have even some of your administrators or umpires that have been in and around. Someone like Anipia, I'm sure he's got he'd have 1,000 stories to tell about cricket back in the day and different things. So those sort of guys, be awesome to hear what they remember and about the game as well. So
I ran into Napier and Maeve at the provincials in July. It was so good to see them, and they're going great. They're going really well. I'm still working as well. But they look very, very happy. And you're right. Someone like Napier who's been such a big part of the game, in his own way, and is very highly respected as an individual as well. Yeah, I think the thing for me with guests is I just want to talk to people who have got a real real fascination about or a real interest, and I think that's a big driver for me, and you're right, I mean, the number one thing and the reason, or the original reason why I wanted to start this was so that those people didn't get lost in the wind, and that they were a big, massive part of our sport, just like Victor Davies is now, or anyone who's around at the moment. And I'm loving the guests that Hendo gets on. You're right, it is a very different flavor, but we talk to each other a lot, and it's he's doing a great thing in his own way, and that's really, really cool. Yeah, great. I've got to listen to that chat with Matt Latham yesterday. It's I'll listen to some of it, and it sounds great. Matt comes across really, really well, and gives an experience, in that state champs that two guys have been a part of, really, and with Bots as a coach as well. But not a lot of people have crossed the water, both ways. We haven't had any Aussies come over here to play over here. I'd love a Lyle Teskey to come and play for Harbour one tournament or something. Imagine how cool that'd be. And for him as well, what a great experience to be able to be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And these things will come. Maybe we'll become a bigger and better sport as we go. Yeah. That's one thing about our sport, is that there's too many passionate people that just love it for these things not to change and for new opportunities to come. So
yeah. All right, my man. Thank you so much. All right, awesome to see you. All the best. Have an awesome day. We'll catch up soon, huh?
Sounds good. Ka kite.
Cheers, brother. Take care, man.